Hello and welcome to Lit Lessons with GCS Memes, your best place to get some very, very quick revision on your different literature texts for your GCSEs with a meme in there as well at the end. Today this lesson is going to be looking at A Christmas Carol and children within Charles Dickens's novel. This is more of a theme-based question, so we'll be doing some analysis of different parts of the text and look at the presentation of children as a whole. So, we are going to have a look at children across the whole of the text. And Dickens, I think it's really important for you to mention things like context in this because you get marked for mentioning context. So it's really good for you to mention that the writer Charles Dickens did write regularly about the unfairness put upon Victorian children. You've got famous texts such as Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, as well as Pip from Great Expectations, who all show you how terribly particularly poor children, lower class children, were treated during that time. And that's exactly the same as what we've got here in A Christmas Carol. So here are the children that I think of when I think of A Christmas Carol. So first of all, I think of Scrooge in the past. We see him as a young child quite soon on in the text. Goes to Christmas Past shows him a version of himself. We see the Cratchit Children and Tiny Tim and Cratchit, in the visions of the present. So we'll be having a look at those characters at different times. And we also see some other ghostly children in the text, and we'll go through those very briefly as a final thing today. So I think it's really important for us to remember that this is written in Victorian times, and we do need to mention context, as said before. So it's really important for us to remember that life for Victorian children was very difficult. Rich Victorian children were quite often sent to boarding schools. They were looked after by nannies. They very rarely had much affection from their parents. And it was obviously even worse for poor Victorian children who essentially were born, many of them, to provide more income for their families. Poor Victorian families quite often had up to 10 children because they were then sent to work and would bring in income for the family. So Dickens seems to recognise this, and the message within A Christmas Carol is to simply treat children better, especially at Christmas, but not just exclusively at Christmas. I think it's important to say as well. So let's have a look through these children in the text and see how they are presented. So first of all, we'll start with Scrooge in the past as a child. I think it's really important to remember he's left alone at Christmas time, and we find this out as we see him in the past and as Scrooge sees himself in the past. And the words solitary and poor are repeated twice in his description of him there to show you how lonely he was during Christmas time. And perhaps this is one of the reasons why he is so against Christmas now he is much older. And this is only encouraged by Dickens's description of the setting. The schoolhouse where he is boarded and where he is staying alone every Christmas is described as incredibly quiet. There's not even a squeak of a mouse. And for that reason, we are again seeing how lonely he is. We also see him with his sister interacting. And this is the first time we really see kind of a more positive view of Scrooge and his emotions towards people, as he seems to really, truly, unconditionally love his sister. And he even says that she had a large heart. So we do see, for the first time, Scrooge showing some positive emotions towards a character other than himself. And then finally, we see a really, really nice description here of him both laughing and crying, experiencing kind of mixed feelings looking back at himself. He obviously seems to recognise how hard his childhood was, but he also seems to have a fondness looking back at how he managed to get through that time. And seem to help himself by, reading books and enjoying his own company every one of those lonely Christmases. So we have this description of Scrooge as a child, and it's obvious that his miserable childhood has led him into sort of a miserable life as well. That's the first child in this. Now we see some other children who should be miserable in the text who aren't, and those are the Cratchit Children. Now we're going to look at Tiny Tim completely separately because he is probably the most significant of the children, but they are all pretty typical children of their time because of them being poor, and they are part of a huge family. I quite often when reading the text lose count of how many Cratchit children there are, and this suggests that they have been born so Bob Cratchit can have a little bit more family income. because that's what was typical of the time, as already mentioned. They all do help out, though, and we see this in the present visions as they prepare for Christmas meal. 3 of the children go to fetch the goose. Some of the others help lay the table. They're all rushing round as one happy family getting ready for that feast on Christmas Day. They are, however, not rich in spite of this, and many of the children are left no option but to work to earn very little and to support the Cratchit household. And Martha is one of those who works at milliner's, where she seems to work incredibly long hours doing her horribly tedious and boring chores to try and bring in Bob some extra income. But in spite of this, they are incredibly positive in the face of adversity, in the face of all the terrible things going on around them. And in the description of the Christmas meal, in the present visions, we have all these words: happy, grateful, pleased, contented, happy. I could go on for even longer, writing down some of the words used for them. But it's shown really how positive these characters are with their situation, which makes us as readers endeared to them, of course. And one of the characters who's most endearing and most likeable in the text is Tiny Tim, who has a disability. He is described, and he describes himself as crippled, and this is obviously a huge social disadvantage. He's an even bigger burden on his family because he can't go out and work as a result of this. But in spite of that, he is grateful and morally good, and he goes to church with his father and is described as good as gold. And it shows you obviously that Bob does value him in spite of the fact if he brings in no gold, he brings in no money. He's worth more than him to him than that. As well as this, he does help to encourage Scrooge's change. Scrooge is desperate for Tiny Tim not to die when he hears that he might. And this is one of the things that really does influence his change in the text, when he hears that Tiny Tim is likely to die if things do not change for him. As well as this, I think Dickens has chosen as well to purposely end the text with some of Tiny Tim's words: God bless us, everyone. And I think it's important for us to realise that I think Dickens does want us to remember the poor, the sick, the young, and to treat them better. Many of his books have this message, and particularly at Christmas, this seems to be the message he spreads here, that we should be treating those who are less fortunate better. And Tiny Tim's moral goodness is something that we should all aspire to have. There are 2 other characters I quickly want us to look at, and that's the Ghost of Christmas Past and Ignorant and Want. Now, Ghost of Christmas Past is described to be childlike, and I think this serves a real simple function. I think it's meant to reflect early, young memories. Okay, so that's one thing. We have older memories and we have younger memories, and that's why he's described as both looking young and old in the text, because he represents all the memories that exist in our heads and in our minds and throughout human history. Ignorance and Want are a little bit more complex, however, and I think what the writer is doing here is describing them as these children who may exist in the future if we do not change our ways. If we do not treat children better, they will become ignorant, they'll become greedy, they will become these kind of stale and shriveled devils in adult life. And that seems to have happened to Scrooge. He had a terrible childhood. He is now sort of a devil in many ways in the way in which he treats other people. So again, the message here seems to be that we need to look after children, treat them better to have a brighter future. Okay, so that's just a bit of a whistle-stop tour of all the children within the text. Obviously, what would be good for you to do now is have a little bit of a go at the question. I'll put a Christmas Carol full text in the description as well if you want to have a look at the text. Have a bit of a pause here. Have a little bit of a go at this question that I've provided for you on the significance of children in a Christmas Carol. Okay, and remember, 1 paragraph on each of these would make a very, very strong essay indeed. To finish today, as always, we end with a meme. Baby Yoda is one of the things that I'm desperate to get into my memes at the moment. A massive lover of Star Wars, and there he is for you there, reminding you of Scrooge's terrible childhood. So, as always, like and subscribe, follow our Instagram page, and provide me anything you want in the comments. Thank you very much.